you're seeing a lower level of mortality on those, and the piglet mortality also on those farms was 9.3%. So lower mortality, higher litters per sow, and a higher born alive is giving those top 25% of farms the 30.3 pigs produced per sow.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Pig Edge, Teagasc's pig podcast with me, Amy Quinn, where we are bringing you the latest news, information and advice to keep Irish pig farmers up to date. The 2022 Teagasc National Pig Herd Performance Report is hot off the press, showing some changes in our key performance indicators for 2022. Here to discuss the report and interpret the figures and trends in more detail for us is Specialised Pig Advisor Ger McCutcheon. I first asked Ger to talk us through the Teagasc Profit Monitor pig recording programme for those that might not be familiar with it, and to outline how it works and how it can be used.
A lot of farmers use the Profit Monitor, and they use it really to allow them analyse their performance on their farms. Most farmers will fill in the data input sheet every 13 weeks. And that 13 weeks then rolls into the previous quarter's figures, so they can compare the 4 quarters figures on an ongoing basis and look at their current performance relative to their previous performance. The beauty of the Profit Monitor system is that because it's a web-based system, we can then use those figures to compare and compile national average figures as well. So that's a good benchmark, and it's a good database for people to see how performance is going on their farm relative to other farms and relative to the average and top 10 and 25% of farms.
Now, Ger, you've just used this programme to compile the 2022 figures. Would you like to give the listeners an overview of the herds that are involved in this?
Yes, we have, at the moment, we have 76 farms with completed data for 2022, and the average herd size on those farms was 744 sows. The range in the sizes of farms will be from anything under 100 sows to much larger farms with over 2,600 sows on those farms. So there's a huge range within it, and the beauty of the web-based system is that we can compile all of the data, but we will do it on a weighted average, so it's not a simple average. So every sow within the system, the performance of each animal within the system is averaged out rather than the average for each farm as such. So it gives us a very good bearing as to how performance is going from year to year.
Now, 2022 was certainly a very difficult year in pig production for farmers because of high feed and energy prices. How have you seen this affect the performance on farms?
It's interesting when you look at it, and I suppose the first thing obviously is that the economic situation last year was dire. It was probably the worst year that I've seen, and I'm working as an advisor for nearly 30 years or over 30 years at this stage. The margin over feed, as we recorded it, was 26 cent. And the last time we saw 26 cent was back in 1999. But the problem last year was that feed prices rose very dramatically, but we also had other costs rising. We also had transport and energy costs rising as well. So the margin over feed that we would always have talked about prior to last year was 45 to 50 cent was kind of break-even type figure, whereas last year 55 cent was what you needed to break even. So there were substantial losses made on farms, and the problem really with that has been, in terms of farms, let's say, being motivated to sell pigs. When you're losing money on pigs that are going out the gate each week, it's very difficult to be motivated. And I suppose it's somewhat reflected in the overall KPIs, the key performance indicators, in that the main KPIs have dropped or disimproved as such last year relative to the previous year.
If we concentrate first on sow performance and the main key performance indicators, there were some changes in 2022. Can you talk us through them?
Yeah, if we look at the pigs produced per sow, which is really the number of pigs that a sow produces minus all of the mortality on the farm. And the pigs produced per sow in 2021 was 28.1 pigs per sow. Last year, it dropped to 27.4. And the main reason for that was that even though the born alive rose on farms from 14.69 to 14.81 as an average born alive per litre, the number of litters dropped slightly from 2.27 to 2.24, but the post-weaning mortality increased. And the post-weaning mortality for weaners was 3.33 last year, while the previous year it was 2.72%. So there was a rise in weaner mortality, and then in finisher mortality, the mortality last year was 3%, whereas the previous years was 2.6%. So the mortalities rose. The born alive improved last year, but unfortunately the post-weaning mortality rose. Interestingly enough, the piglet mortality remained the very same. It was 11.1%. And it's very hard to know, just going back to the previous question, because of the difficult economic situation, the post-weaning mortality may reflect a number of items. One is possibly less antibiotics going into feed, zinc oxide being taken out of weaner rations, but also I would say the labour on farms perhaps was reduced to the minimum, and the element of mortality may have crept up as a result of that.
And if we were to look at the top 25% of farms in terms of pigs per sow per year, what do we see in terms of performance?
Yeah, the number of pigs produced per sow on the average farm, as I said, was 27.4 pigs per sow last year. On the top 25% of farms, that figure was 30.3 pigs produced per sow. The litters per sow on that top 25% of farms was 2.3 litters per sow per year, and the born alive on those farms was 15.31. So there's a rise, a higher level of born alive on those top 25%, and there's also a higher level of litters per sow. But also the weaner and finisher mortality is lower. The weaner mortality on those top 25% was 2.55%, and the finisher mortality was 2.48 or 2.5%. So you're seeing a lower level of mortality on those, and the piglet mortality also on those farms was 9.3%. So lower mortality, higher litters per sow, and a higher born alive is giving those top 25% of farms the 30.3 pigs produced per sow. So they're achieving, higher sow output, and they're also achieving lower mortalities, which suggests, I suppose, that from a healthcare and management point of view, they're in a better position than perhaps some farms that are included in the average figures.
Yeah, it's quite a significant difference. Now, if we look at growing pigs, how was the performance in 2022?
Yeah, in 2021, we start there. The average growth rate from the time the pig was weaned off the sow at approximately 7 kilos up to sale weight was 750 grams. So that's the daily gain per, let's say, 750 grams per day. Last year in 2022, the average daily gain from weaning to sale was 736 grams. So it dropped by 14 grams per day. Interestingly, the sale weight was the very, very same at 118.4 kilos live weight, and the kill out was slightly poor, giving us a slightly poor dead weight. But from weaning to sale, when we look at those figures, it's based on a live weight basis, and those figures, let's say, are showing that 736 grams was what was achieved last year relative to 750 the previous year. So there is a slight cutoff there, or drop there. And again, that may reflect some of the issues that farmers also had to deal with on top of the economics, but also, let's say, some of the issues in relation to taking zinc oxide out of the diet.
Absolutely. Ger, what happened in relation to feed conversion weaning to sale in 2022?
Yeah, in 2022, the feed conversion from weaning to sale rose to 2.45. So in 2021, that figure was at 2.39. So effectively, we had a disimprovement in the feed conversion from weaning to sale of 0.06 of a unit on feed conversion. So that means we're using more feed ultimately to achieve weight gain in our pigs.
Now, feed is a major cost in the production of pig meat. So can you tell us what the feed cost is on the average and the top 25% of farms in 2022?
As I said, in 2022, the average was 2.45 feed conversion from weaning to sale. The top 25% of farms achieved a feed conversion of 2.28. So, their saving on feed is quite substantial. Now, we can't take it one for one because in the top 25% of farms, they sold their pigs at a lighter weight. They sold their pigs at 113.7 kilos live weight, whereas on the average farm, the sale weight was 118.4 kilos live weight. So if we balance up for the sale of pig meat and the reduced feed that those top 25% of farms used, their feed cost was, let's say, the average was coming in at 153.6 cent per kilo, whereas the top 25% were coming in at 7 cent less per kilo on feed cost. So that's a substantial saving. And it shows you, let's say, that feed conversion, particularly because feed prices were so high last year, there was a huge return on achieving a very good feed conversion.
Aside from feed costs, what other costs are dealt with, and were there any other major increases in 2022?
Yes, we look at all of the feed costs that farmers report on their data input sheet. The normal figures, let's say, we look at all the heat, power and light, the healthcare, labour, and all of the other costs that are detailed within the data input sheet. The main changes, I suppose, last year that showed up were in relation to the energy costs. Apart from the feed costs going up substantially, the energy costs also went up substantially. And heat, power and light in 2021 was 7.1 cent. Last year, it was 9.2. Now, most of us would have expected that figure would have gone up higher when we see the energy costs and the bills that people are facing. But a number of farmers would have, let's say, secured and fixed their deals with their energy suppliers. So the 9.2 cent is where heat, power and light came in. The transport cost came in at 2.1 cent per kilo deadweight. And that was 1 cent per kilo deadweight the previous year. So again, a rise there, and one hopes that those energy costs will start to reduce, as energy costs appear to be reducing now. But they were substantial enough, and they were the main costs that would have changed relative to the previous year. So overall, those costs added to the production cost, and that's why we said last year, you would need a margin over feed of 55 cent rather than the 50 cent figure that we would have quoted before.
Ger, when putting the figures together, was there anything that really surprised you?
When you look at these figures, and every year we've looked at these figures, we've always seen an improvement on an ongoing basis. And last year, it's the first time we've seen that number of pigs produced per sow drop, and also the feed conversion from weaning to sale has been slowly but surely improving over the years. What surprised me, I suppose, is that step backwards. We've gone backwards rather than forwards last year on the KPIs, but that may, as I said earlier, that may reflect the economic conditions and the labor element that's on farms, because a lot of farms are struggling to find labor. But secondly, let's say, because margins were so tight last year, they stripped labor back as far as they possibly could. And from that perspective, those KPIs, when you look at them initially and you say, gosh, this is a major surprise, when you put it into the perspective of the difficulties that the sector was facing last year, I probably haven't surprised, really.
Yeah, it has to be reflected somewhere. These figures have been compiled for a long time now. How long do we have records for, and what is the trend in the pigs produced per sow per year?
We have records dating back probably into the 1990s, but we've compiled them, let's say, each year. if we look at it and just go back to the year 2000, it's a nice start as such. The number of pigs produced per sow in the year 2000 was 21.5 pigs per sow per year. It's a nice figure to remember. So 21.5 pigs per sow in the year 2000. We're now up at 27.4. The sale weight of the pigs in the year 2000 was 90.1 kilos live weight, whereas now we're up at 118.4 kilos live weight. So there's been a substantial increase in the amount of pig meat produced per sow. And, when we look at those figures and you start to look at them even from a sustainability point of view, you can start to see that there are improvements, or there have been improvements in the overall figures of using so much feed to achieve so much gain or meat production as such. So, it's part of an argument that you would say supports the improvements in sustainability. And a large measure of that improvement over the years has been improvements in genetics, growth rates, feed conversions, and also improvements in nutritional management on farms as well. So there has been a lot of improvements there over the years, and that's probably the reason that it's important to look at these figures on an ongoing basis to see, are we improving, and to try and benchmark that improvement year on year. As I said, last year is the first year that we've come back a little bit in performance, but one would hope that will improve again this year now that the profitability is coming back into the sector.
With the Profit Monitor program, farmers can benchmark their figures against the average and top performing farms. Can you talk us through this a small bit?
Yeah, when any farmers produces when they supply their data input sheet, their advisor will produce the report, the detailed report on the Profit Monitor. And they can also, if they wish, get a benchmark report to compare their most recent quarter with the average in the top 25% of farms on the system. So it's a nice report to do. Every now and again. You don't need to do it every time you do your figures, but it is a nice report to generate, particularly to start a conversation on the farm to say, okay, we're in the average figures, but let's try and get to the top 25%. So it's a nice way of trying to say, okay, we can actually achieve it. The one thing that I would always say, from looking at these figures and looking at the top 20 to 25% and the top 10% of farms, is that there are farms out there achieving much better results. And those improvements, as I said earlier, the top 25% of farms based on feed conversion, they were getting an improvement in their feed cost of 7 cents. That's a huge prize for any farmer to look for. 7 cents per kilo of pig meat is a huge return if you can achieve that. And the element of then sitting down and saying, okay, if we are in the average group, why are we in the average group? If we're in the top 25%, those guys are looking at it and saying, okay, how do we get into the top 10%? So everything is driving forward with a view towards trying to improve the economic returns from the system, but also to improve the performance on the system as well.
Yeah, in a difficult year like last year, the difference between them was never so important and obvious, I suppose.
That's correct. And last year was a very, very difficult year. And while it's very difficult to motivate yourself to achieve performance, let's say by farming your way out of the crisis, you will get involved in reducing the deficits or the losses at a much faster rate if you are able to improve your performance.
If we look at some of the other major players in Europe, how do our figures compare for 2022?
The Interpig group looks at production and performance on an international basis, and over the years, let's say the 2022 figures for the Interpig group, they won't be compiled until late August or thereabouts each year. But historically, when we look at the European figures and the output, the Dutch and the Danes are probably the two countries we look at most. And the main reason for looking at them is that they are the high achievers in terms of the Danes are pushing forward on pigs produced per sow per year. They're over 17 born alive. Their piglet mortality would be higher than our 11.1%, but the number of pigs produced per sow would be a lot higher than our 27.4. The Danish production system, we have to be careful in the sense that the Danish production system is generally based on buying in F1 gilts into the farm from outside high health farms, and their health status, let's say, within the farms is probably a lot better than on a large portion of Irish farms. The second element of that would be that the Danish, looking at the figures, the Danish daily gain figures would be probably stronger than our figures as well, but that may be because of the high health status on their farms. The Dutch are probably the favourites or the leaders on the feed conversion side of it. And again, let's say the Dutch grow their pigs a little bit more slowly, but their feed conversions would be very, very good. And we would benchmark our figures against both of those countries, particularly just to see, are we making strides to achieve what they're achieving. The genetics in Ireland at this stage are quite similar to what they have, in Denmark and in the Netherlands. And from that perspective, there's no reason as to why we can't start to get to the high figures that they are achieving.
What's next for the profit monitor system in relation to the pig sector? Can we expect any changes or improvements?
Yeah, well, we're always trying to improve or increase the number of farmers that are using the profit monitor. And the main reason for that, we would feel, is that it's a good tool for any farmer to compare their figures with any other pig farmer in the country. There are a number of computerized recording systems that we have looked at, and we are working with some of those companies that supply those recording systems, with a view towards them generating the data input sheet, so that we're streamlining the compilation of the data input sheet. And once we have the data input sheet, we can run the figures that are being achieved on each individual farm through the profit monitor system. So over the next couple of years, I would be hopeful that while we have probably about 42 or 43% of the national sow herd on the profit monitor, I'd be hopeful that we could increase that quite substantially by linking with some of those computer companies and trying to generate that data input sheet from the records that are on those systems. So it's I suppose using the technology to help us all, let's say, achieve and improve performance on farms.
Yeah, it's efficiencies for everybody, really.
Absolutely. So it does make sense to try and achieve that, because there are systems out there and a number of systems that farmers are using currently that I would say we're getting very, very close to that data input sheet being ready to be produced. So once we get there, and we can reliably understand that the figures that are going into that data input sheet are exactly as we would interpret them for the profit monitor, well, then we're in a good place in terms of driving that forward.
Thanks, Ger. A lot of information there. Thanks for your interpretation and your insight.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Pig Edge, and thanks a million to Ger for joining me on the show. Don't forget to listen and follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss an episode. And for more information from the Pig Development Department, go to teagasc.ie/pigs and follow us on Twitter at @teagascpigs. Until next time, I'm Amy Quinn. Thanks for listening.